So carrying capacity is how much life can this land support? So what do you need to support life? Food. And innate, by food, do you mean hamburgers and hot dogs?
No, like other animals. Like
Crops, plants. So first you have to start with something called producers. What are producers?
They make energy.
That's right. Mostly producers are plants. They use photosynthesis. They make complex energy molecules, one of the questions on your OST practice, called sugar. A carbohydrate. That's what they use, the process of photosynthesis to try to connect it to the previously reviewed and covered and reviewed material. They do it by using these things called chloroplasts. So producers are the basis of any area that's going to hold life. So you have plants, usually they're plants. In the ocean, they could be blue-green algae. So it could be I should put off to the side, just as an aside. Producers can be, I shouldn't even write it there. Can be algae, which are not plants. All right. Blue-green algae, for instance, is the producer in the oceans. So in this case, you'd get aquatic ecosystems. On land, they're plants are what they do. There are another type of producer, and I should mention it because I don't know what they're going to ask on the exam, but it's also important you understand that there are another group of producers that are really weird. When I say weird, is because they're probably the first organisms on the planet, and they're also live in the most extreme environments, and they're rare as compared to the photosynthesize. These are photosynthesizing. These guys here, these producers, get their energy from what? So this is how most life on planet Earth gets its energy. The source of energy is from the sun. The source then flows from the sun it flows to these ecosystems, okay, to these producers. But there are another kind of producer that use chemosynthesis. This type of production does not depend on the sun. Chemosynthesis is done where? Where do you think chemosynthesis? What do you think chemosynthesis is, by the way, before I even go any further? Say that again. Oh, that's a good idea. Well, let's clarify something first. Radiation therapy and chemotherapy are two different things. Chemotherapy is when you add chemicals to try to kill cancer. Radiation therapy is when you use radiation to try to kill cancer. They are both used to treat cancer, but they're different. So chemosynthesis, we know synthesis is the making. What is chemo? They're making it from chemicals. and not from the sun. They're not using the sun as the source of energy, but they're using chemical reactions in the source of energy. And these organisms live near volcanic vents at the bottom of the ocean, in the crust of the earth, where the sun is not shining, in the dark areas, in dark places. So, like I said, the volcanic vents, there's a whole ecosystem of volcanic vents. At the bottom of the ocean, no light, no sunlight penetrates that deep, but they're still able to do chemosynthesis. They still create life. They still are able to make energy, make chemical energy. So again, what are we talking about? The volcanic vents at the bottom of the ocean, the crust of the earth. Yeah.
What's that wood that stems out all those notes in the center?
Chloroplast?
Chloroplast?
No, the one like to the left of that. Oh, producers. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, these are all producers. All of these are producers. They're at the bottom. Everything that lives that's not a producer depends on producers. Is that clear? We depend on producers. When people are like, who cares about some trees? You should. Without them, we're not here. We depend on plants. They don't depend on us. Yes?
What is that
Under what? Environment. It's abbreviated for
Producers.
No, not that one. It says chemical.
make chemical energy from the environment. Environ. Dot. Are we good? So producers are necessary. Excuse me. Producers are necessary for all the rest of life to exist. Insects, any animal life, or fungal life for that matter, or bacteria, all depend on these producers. So the question is, what do the producers need? So we need producers. But their form of life, what do producers need? Yeah.
They need sunlight. Right?
Correct. So producers need a source of energy. These are things you need to know. If you don't know these things, you won't be able to answer any complicated question or a simple one for that matter. Producers need many of them need sunlight. Remember, chemosynthetic organisms don't need sunlight, correct? But the sun, or a source of energy, what else do you need for photosynthesis?
Water.
Water's correct.
Carbon dioxide.
Then it's correct, exactly right. Water, carbon dioxide, CO2, and just to add a source of nitrogen, correct? What do you need nitrogen to make nucleic acids and proteins? So this is your source of carbon here, CO2. This is your source of nitrogen. Where are you going to get nitrogen? Well, we'll talk about that tomorrow probably. But these are the four things you're going to need if plants are going to grow. There's some minerals probably too. There's other things that has to be acidic depending on the species of plant, but so you need minerals, you need nitrogen, you need phosphorus. Of the minerals, probably phosphorus is the biggest one. Why do you need phosphorus?
The construction of proteins.
Is phosphorus in protein?
Phosphorus.
phosphate. What do you need phosphate in? Yeah. Nucleic acids, yeah, DNA. DNA and RNA. So phosphorus, and you need potassium ion. So those are kind of the two big minerals, but there's others. Those are kind of the 5 things you're going to have to have on this land if you're going to support life. Because that's what the producers need. All of these things are not, are they alive? Is any of this alive?
Yeah. Or wait, the stuff.
This list, these 5 lists, these are not alive. So we call these things, what do you think we call them? Let me ask you. Abiotic. There's other abiotic factors like wind and so I can't think of anything right off the top of my head, but wind would be a factor. The type of soil. Some plants like sandy soil. Some plants like clay soil. Clay soil holds more water, so the plant has to be able to manage that extra water. Sandy soil doesn't allow for water to stay for very long, so it either has to be raining a lot or the plant has to be able to deal with drought. So there's different needs that are also abiotic, okay? But these are the main abiotic factors. These are producers. The producers themselves are alive. So the producers are what? A biotic factor. A producer is a biotic factor. Some biotic things that producers need are things like, for instance, trees need fungus. Did you know that trees need a fungus? Trees need fungus in order to get certain minerals. They have roots, but their roots don't do a great job at getting these minerals and getting nitrogen. So a lot of plants, in order to get nitrogen, need bacteria and fungi. Yep. So a biotic factor that plants need is the presence of nitrogen fixing bacteria. And we'll talk about what that is in a minute, probably tomorrow. But you're going to need bacteria that fix nitrogen, that capture nitrogen for the plant. So those are the producers in any environment. So that's great. How much production you have, how much organic material you have can help determine how many animals can live on that land. Yeah.
So with like nitrogen fixing bacteria, are you saying like the nitrogen make the bacteria go away or the bacteria is fixing them?
Oh, I guess I have to explain it now. Okay. What is the composition? There's this thing that you call air, correct?
Yeah.
What is air? There is oxygen in it. Is it mostly oxygen? It's mostly nitrogen, N2 gas. There's oxygen gas. There is oxygen. It's about 20 some odd percent. About 20%. About 70% nitrogen. There is some CO2. I don't quote me on the number, but about 3% CO2. It's going higher, unfortunately. And then there's other trace gases. All right, so air. That's the stuff you breathe in. This stuff here, this nitrogen, is useless to everything on planet Earth. Nothing can use it's what we call inert. It doesn't react to anything. In fact, we use nitrogen gas in the laboratory to conduct experiments because we know it's not going to react with anything. So that's a problem for us because we need the plants need nitrogen to make proteins and nucleic acids, and we need the plants to have nitrogen so we can get nitrogen to make our proteins and our nucleic acids. So we need nitrogen. So the nitrogen's in the air. It turns out that back little tiny, again, we live in an ecosystem. An ecosystem, any system, is a group of small parts all working together. A bunch of cogs in a machine. You take a cog out of a machine, usually the machine stops working. So this is these little bacteria live under the earth, under the ground. Can never find brown. All right, thank you. That's why I never find brown. So live under the earth, and trees have root systems that go out, other plants as well. The bacteria live in the ground, and they hang out around the roots. Also, it's not just bacteria, it's bacteria and fungus. Mushrooms fungi are very important to this process. Yeah.
Is there any particular reason as to why nitrogen makes up most of the air composition, and why wouldn't it be something with oxygen?
Well, to say reason, it is what it is. That is what existed, and the thought is that life came after this stuff, right? And as life evolved, it used what it had. So the nitrogen's here, and that's what it used. Now, reason why is nitrogen in the composition? Can't tell you. I can tell you that it would not be good if oxygen was the main component of the atmosphere, because then a spark would blow up the planet. So the more oxygen you have, the more combustible things would be. So just rubbing up against a tree would catch a tree on fire. Okay, let's go back even further. So there's something called the fire. To have a fire, you need three things. In fact, we used to call it the fire triangle. You need a fuel, something to burn. A tree, hair, paper, whatever. Something's going to burn, usually a carbon polymer. You need oxygen, because the oxidizing or adding oxygen to these polymers is what causes the release of energy. And you need a spark. You need that little bit of activation energy. Remember, with any enzyme, with any chemical reaction, you have the reactants. You need some kind of energy, and then that produces a massive release of energy, and you end up with the products. So you need some kind of energy to help help the chemical reaction start. Once it starts, you release all this energy, and then the product is at a lower energy state. So what happens is that to get a fire, you need a spark. This is the spark. When that happens, fire happens, so that it releases all that energy, and then you're left with ashes. The ashes don't have a lot of energy in them. You can't burn ashes, for instance. So that's why having too much of this oxygen would be a problem, because then it would be much easier to have a fire occur. That sounds like a good thing until you rub up against someone else and you both catch on fire. That would be no good. So in any case, you need bacteria and fungus. What they do is they take the nitrogen out of the air and they turn it into nitrates. And nitrates can be absorbed into the tree. Nitrates are usable. Nitrates are usable. Nitrogen gas is not usable by life, except for bacteria and fungus. Some fungus, but certainly nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Without the bacteria, we don't have nitrogen. Plants don't have nitrogen, we don't have nitrogen. So you need the nitrogen. The fungus helps with the absorption of other minerals. The fungus can produce really tiny, really super surface area projections that help absorb a lot of these minerals. And they exchange the sugar. The tree produces sugar, gives it to the fungus and the bacteria. The bacteria give them nitrogen and minerals. So it's a symbiotic relationship that's a very mutually beneficial relationship. Does that all that make sense to you? So that's what nitrogen fixing is. That's why we need bacteria. We need a biotic factor called nitrogen fixing bacteria in order to get nitrogen to actually be in the soil. Without it, there is no nitrogen in the soil. So all these things help to determine how much, and if you're looking at, let's say you're looking at wolves, you want to know the carrying capacity of this land for a population of wolves. What would you need to know? What are some abiotic factors?
How much the land can carry?
What are some of the factors that will help determine how many wolves the land can carry? Water. How much water there is for the wolves to drink.
Food.
Don't say food. Specifically.
Land area?
Land area. They need space. You know, they're territorial, so they need space. What?
They're like predators, or they're not predators, they're prey.
They need prey.
Supposed to.
That is a food source, a specific food source. They need prey, and then what are the prey gonna need?
They're gonna need
The prey need plants, right? And then plants also need water, right?
They don't need decomposers.
So really, the wolves don't need plants. The prey need plants, right? The decomposers are just necessary to get rid of the waste, yeah. Anything. So there's both listed here, right? So an abiotic factor would be area, the space available, would be water is abiotic, correct? But then the prey and the plants are biotic. Well, maybe that would help determine the carrying capacity. That's true, but that's only be competition for what? Prey and space, right? Yeah. Huh? The wolves themselves don't need it, but the plants do. So. So again, we're back to some abiotic factors here. Maybe. Not sure. Maybe because the climate might impact the plants. But these are the big ones, right? And you're right. Competitions and we call this. These are the factors that are then going to help determine the carrying capacity of that land. And so when you look at any graph, if you introduce a set of wolves to any area, you start off with a small population, and what happens to that population over time? It starts to go up because you have a lot of land, you have a lot of prey, you have a lot of water. Now it starts to go up really fast, and then what happens after a while? Because there's not enough food, what happens to the wolves? They start to die. Now they died enough that there's plenty of prey, plenty of food, plenty of water, plenty of space. What happens? They go back up. They overshoot again. One last thought before we go on. So they keep doing that back and forth, and they're going to keep doing that forever, life and death. But they're going to do it going around the carrying capacity is not at the very top, but is actually here.
So it's in between.
It's right, the carrying capacity is where the population oscillates around. above and below consistently. The more data you have, the more you'll see this. All right. That should be it for carrying capacity. I hope it helps you do your activity.